What the fuck was that? Elsa packed 5 apples. She hoped she wouldn't eat any of them. They were insurance more than food, tucked into her pack beside her sleeping bag, pad, ground cloth, warm layers, and the few things she needed for 5 nights alone in the wilderness. At the last minute, someone handed her a folded t-shirt. You should take this with you, they'd said. Elsa laughed, shoved it to the bottom of her pack without looking at it, and forgot about it. She was fasting, or attempting to. If her body told her to eat, she would. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She just wanted to see what happened when everything unnecessary fell away. Food, conversation, schedules, other people's expectations. For 5 days, there would only be Elsa and the mountain. She knew this place well. That mattered. On other solo trips, darkness had turned every snapping branch into a predator. She had learned to stay anyway, learned that fear could rise through her without requiring that she obey it. But this time was different. The fear never came. On the first night, she crawled into her sleeping bag and waited for it. Nothing. Just wind in the trees, water over stones, stars appearing one by one. She smiled into the darkness, alone and completely comfortable. It occurred to her how rare this was. Her life held real joy, plenty of it, bright and sudden and true. But it rarely arrived like this, unhurried, unbroken, without something else pressing in close behind it. This time, nothing was pressing. She carried a cell phone in case of emergency, but it remained off in her pack. No emails to answer, no texts, no calls to return. And strangely, she wasn't hungry. Morning came, then afternoon, then another night. The apples stayed untouched. One afternoon, a hummingbird hovered a few feet from her face. It didn't feed, didn't dart towards a flower. It just hung there, looking at her. For several seconds they watched each other. Then it flew off up the stream. Elsa laughed. Okay. She had started doing this months earlier, asking. She wasn't sure who she was asking. God sounded too specific. The universe, too vague. Whatever intelligent energy moved through things, made cells divide, and whales migrate. She had started asking it questions, and the more specific she got, the more surprising the answers became. In Massachusetts, she had asked to see animals and found herself surrounded. Massive gulls gliding beneath the bluff where she stood watching. Hundreds of northern gannets hovering over the waves and then folding into arrows and plunging into the Atlantic. Whales breaching, one after another. And one day, a northern flicker. It reminded her of an old Disney song about the natural world having something to teach us if we paid attention. She knew how ridiculous that sounded, but it had rung true. Maybe they were coincidences. Of course they could be. That didn't make them meaningless. Now, high in the mountains, the conversation seemed to continue. Ravens crossed the enormous blue sky. Sometimes she found their feathers dark and iridescent against the pale granite. She followed them like breadcrumbs and began to feel like they were leading her somewhere remembered, like they were leading her home. One morning she woke before sunrise. The meadow was still. Then she heard movement. Elk. A group of 5 bucks running in bursts through the grass, wheeling, kicking their legs into the air. One chased another. Another leapt sideways. She sat completely still, watching them dance. Then one of them saw her. It didn't run. It watched her, the way you'd watch something familiar. One by one, the others noticed too. None of them ran. They watched her for a while, then went back to grazing and wandered out of the meadow like she was simply part of it. She knew perfectly well that elk didn't wake before sunrise to perform for solitary women fasting in the mountains. But for a few minutes, she let herself believe they had. Later, she hiked to one of her favorite lakes, stripped down and stepped into the cold. Up to her waist, her chest, she pushed off and rolled onto her back. Sky above, water beneath, her ears slipped under until the world became muffled. She stopped swimming, stopped trying to go anywhere. The lake held her, and she had the strange sensation that she wasn't swimming in it at all. She was wearing it. A robe of cold green water draped over her body. By the fourth day, she climbed higher, into rock and wind and ancient bristlecone pines. That evening, she built a small fire. Elsa stood in front of the flames, feeling the energy of that place moving through her in waves. And then something changed. No flash, no sound. Her perspective simply lifted. She could still see her boots, her hands, the orange light on her jacket, but she was watching them from above. 20 feet, then 50. The fire shrank to an ember below her. She didn't decide to rise. She simply understood that rising was possible, the way you understand you can lift your arm. So she went higher. The bristlecones flattened into a dark carpet. The ridge opened beneath her, then the next ridge, then the whole spine of the mountain range, pale under the stars. She wasn't afraid. She had the distinct sensation that she was much larger than the shape standing by the fire, that whatever she was did not stop at her skin, and never had. For a while she simply hung there, above everything she loved. Then gently she came back down, into her hands, her boots, the fire. Elsa stood motionless. "What the fuck was that?" Elsa asked out loud. The mountain offered no explanation. Later, in her sleeping bag, warm and safe and exhausted, she closed her eyes and saw a woman made of light, enormous, maternal, ancient without being old. "I am grandmother, and I just gave birth to a new world." Elsa opened her eyes. Darkness, sleeping bag, mountain, stars. She had no idea what it meant. The next morning she woke before the sun and watched light spill across the mountains, ridge by tree, until the whole landscape began to glow. Standing there, she felt the waves move through her again. Energy, life, not metaphorically, as though the same thing moving through the roots and birds and water and sunlight was moving through her too. Only here she could feel it more clearly. She loved this mountain, and in that moment she felt loved by it. For her final night, she camped at the edge of another meadow. Her legs were tired. Her body was tired. The apples were still in her pack. She looked out across the grass and felt ridiculously happy. Not euphoric, not enlightened, just quietly, completely happy. She thought about the hummingbird, the ravens, the elk dancing at dawn, the enormous version of herself above the fire, and grandmother. Elsa smiled and asked, "Okay, one more sign. An animal." Then, so there'd be no mistaking it, she said, "And this time, don't just show it to me. Let it interact with me. Make it obvious." A few minutes passed. Something large moved through the trees, then vanished. She sat up on her pad, sleeping bag still zipped around her, and watched the meadow. Then a bird hopped into view. Black spots, a long, broad beak, that unmistakable crescent across its chest. A northern flicker. For a second, Elsa forgot to breathe. The same bird that had appeared months earlier, back when she first started asking whether anything was listening. It didn't stay at a distance. It hopped closer, then closer again, until it was pecking at the ground just past her feet, well within arm's reach, unbothered by her, like it had been sent there on purpose. Elsa started laughing, and softly said, "Okay." It kept searching for something tasty, then eventually flew away. She didn't need to know whether the universe had actually sent it. For once, she didn't need an explanation. That night, she dreamed of grandmother again, except this time Elsa was there too, and somehow her own hands were grandmother's hands, younger, the same presence in another form. Elk moved through the grass around her, ravens circled, a hummingbird hovered close, the flicker landed at her feet. In the distance rose a mountain. Its shape tugged at something in her memory. Above the summit stood grandmother, watching over everything gathered beneath her. Elsa tried to look closer. Then she woke up. Morning light was seeping across the meadow. She held on to the dream for a moment, that mountain still visible in her mind. It was familiar, but from where? She packed sleeping bag, pad, ground cloth, warm layers, the 5 untouched apples. Near the bottom of the pack, exactly where she'd shoved it that first day, her hand found something else. The t-shirt someone had handed her before she left. "I think you should take this with you," they had said. She pulled it out. Printed across the front was a mountain. Same ridgeline, same slope, the exact shape she had just been looking at in her dream. She pulled the shirt over her head and stood at the edge of the meadow, arms open wide, like she could hold it all, the grass, the ridgeline, the light. For a moment she felt like joy itself, like life was flowing into her and out of her at the same time, with no clear line between the two. She stood like that for a few more minutes before beginning the hike home, stopping along the way to notice details she had missed on the first day. 5 days earlier, she had come into the mountains wanting to listen. Something had been listening back. She had spent 5 days celebrating the mountain, and somewhere along the way, she began to feel like the mountain was celebrating her in return.
And in fact, tonight, she did confirm. The cold never lasts, my darling. It just teaches the heart how to burn.